my experience as an intern in Africa began in the spring of 2004. I got an opportunity to work with the International Crisis Group, which is a big global NGO specializing in advocacy, conflict resolution. And I got an opportunity to work as a researcher in West Africa. It was particularly interesting for me from several points of view. As someone who sort of born and grew up in Nigeria, I'd never really embraced the thought of working in another African country. It'd always been sort of outside Africa, working in Europe, working in America. So this was a kind of a weird coming back home for me. And then moving to Senegal, it was exciting as well because as a French speaker, it was another opportunity for me to use and exercise my language skills. And I thought, okay, great environment. It's going to give me an opportunity to sort of understand Africa from a different perspective. So I had the opportunity to live and work in Senegal for a few months in 2004. And I think for me, the biggest plus from that experience of working as an intern, and let's not forget when you're working as an intern, it's a very different set of ball games. You don't necessarily get paid a full salary. You have a slightly different status. But with that, the rewards you get are more in kind, not in cash, so to speak. So what you get is experience, unrivaled experience. You get to work across several different projects for different people in any one organization, institution. You're doing a whole range of tasks, from the really mundane to stuff that requires you to actually attend meetings, write briefs, or brief people. That was great experience. I got an opportunity to research several different African countries, including the country I was working in Senegal. I got an opportunity to shadow other associates and directors in the office because I was in a frame of mind where I was open to learning. I was sort of embracing this opportunity to really understand the local context of being in an African country, speaking with locals. I mean, I had several funny experiences that were staying with me forever. And this is one of the things I write on my blog, actually, because I wrote a lot about my Africa travels as an intern. And I remember times in Senegal, I guess because of my height, being tall and that sort of thing. And you'd have these local Senegalese people on the street suddenly speak the local language to me, speak Wolof to me, thinking I was Senegalese, and I would respond to them in French. No, je suis pas Sénégalaise, je suis Nigérian. And as soon as they heard, oh gosh, you're from Nigeria, they'd start talking about all sorts of things. Nollywood, we'd get into debates about, education, government politics, and so those were the sort of byproducts of my internship time in Africa. Those are the things you can't really place a value on, the local context. And it's fair to say it was that particular experience that opened up a whole new world of opportunities, because as soon as you come back to this part of the world and you want to work in Africa, what they will ask you is, do you have local experience? So that was absolutely invaluable. And of course my French improved a lot during that time on the ground, because people don't have experience of actually having lived and worked in a place. They build their perceptions by what is reported by other people say. And the concept of Africa as, Africa, the corporate environment, Africa, the continent with multinationals, Africa, the continent with, highly educated professionals going about their business, Africa, the continent with infrastructure, that whole concept is shaped by other people's experiences. And so for me, it was a real eye-opener. Of course, as an African, Africa is developed. It's a lot more developed than people make it out to be sometimes. And there's a lot more depth to Africa than just the images we see. But I think part of that, my understanding and grasp of Africa from that perspective, that highly sophisticated perspective you talked about, also came not just from the internship, but out of all the other subsequent work. Following the internship, I knew I wanted to work in Africa. And I knew I wanted to work in an organization that meant I could travel around in Africa and actually experience the variety and depth of experience, whether that's professional or business. But you will find that increasingly, in my experience, that even those expats who work and live on the ground in Africa have a very good and highly informed perspective. And I think this is something that increasingly both Africans and expatriates who've had experience of Africa need to translate and sort of convey to others on the other side of the world. The fact is that Africa is one of the most complex, diverse, and intriguing places professionally you will ever find. And there is a very specific type of business culture in Africa. And it's interesting that a lot of global multinationals today are talking about going local. and you can understand why. It's not just enough to make your big decisions sitting in The Hague or in London or in New York. You actually have to have boots on the ground. And it's because of that unique local taking perspective that a lot of multinationals are wanting to locate their businesses in Africa. It's a very different experience. You can't really grasp and understand that remotely. And I think people are understanding that, and those who know and love Africa and have done business in Africa understand that. And I think so the tide is certainly shifting in another direction, and it's really interesting and exciting. I mean, the Africa Business Management course is absolutely unique in terms of actually trying to put in a framework most people's understanding of Africa. And I mentioned before that a lot of people's understanding of what Africa is about, is shaped by so many different things. And often people have no way of sort of conceptualizing that. So it's almost like looking at a blank piece of paper and you think, oh my gosh, where do I start? This is exactly what I see as potentially the greatest asset of this course. It's helping you to really compartmentalize and think in Africa in a very sophisticated way. Pretty much the same way you would approach any problem that you need to solve. Essentially, let's dissect it, let's break it down. An intern needs to understand everything from, arriving in Africa, what sort of everything, if things as mundane as what sort of clothes to wear in a particular climate, how to pay homage or show respect to people in an African setting, the relationship between different genders, between adults and younger people, those sorts of things that I think an intern, that's part of the global world experience. Because in order to respect culture, you need to understand culture. And that is invaluable. And in certain cases, it actually can mean difference between life and death. It's almost about survival. How do you survive in this environment that you find yourself in? And most interns will be young people. So essentially, as a young person in a globalized age, you need to understand Africa in as much as you need to understand, how to avoid contracting, malaria. From that point of view, it's absolutely unique and it's interesting. And also, I think, as an intern who potentially eventually wants to work in Africa, it also gives you an initial good grounding knowledge and understanding of the continent, of the political, economic dynamics, business dynamics, societal dynamics, that sort of thing.